When I speak like this, of course, I fall into that national security offense, collusion. Actually, this is not colluding with no one. I'm just making a suggestion. But I guess they will say suggestion is also a crime.
Yeah, for the record, we're not making any plan here. You know, this is not collusion, China, in case you're listening. Thanks so much for, agreeing to do this interview. First, I would just like to ask just a very broad general question, just if you could just share with us your opinion on the Hong Kong national security law, and then afterwards we'll, go into some more details.
I'm speaking to you from a very anxious and frightened and very worried city of Hong Kong because, as you are probably aware, the China's rubber stamp parliament, the National People's Congress Standing Committee started meeting yesterday, Thursday. At first, the national security law was not on the agenda, but bang, bingo. Suddenly, at around in the early afternoon, the Xinhua, the New China News Agency, released something to say that, oh yes, it's now been introduced to the agenda and they are going to discuss it. And of course, the law covers several offenses. Crime of secession, that is separating from the People's Republic of China, subversion of state power, terrorist activities, and collusion with foreign and external forces. And this collusion is a new concept, because when it was announced by the NPC last month, it talked about foreign interference. But now it changed to collusion. And of course, the penalty, and collusion is a crime in mainland China. And the penalty is 10 years or up to life imprisonment. And so they are discussing it. And of course, Hong Kong is very concerned. But the announcement of the fact that the NPC Standing Committee is discussing it coincides with the 7-hour meeting in Hawaii between the U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and the Chinese Politburo member Yang Jiechi. And of course, they also admitted that they talk about Hong Kong and Taiwan and Xinjiang and all that. But of course, at the same time, when the Chinese met the Americans, the Chinese, Mr. Yang, protested against this letter from the foreign ministers from the G7 countries and also from the European Union, asking China to back off from enacting the national security law on Hong Kong. So you can see there may be a lot of international support asking Beijing not to do it, particularly from Western powers. Anyway, so we will continue to speak to our friends, whether it's in North America, in Europe, in Asia, and elsewhere, and tell them our concerns. And this change of the word, changing from foreign interference into Hong Kong affairs, changing it to collusion. So, Ben, I don't know whether me talking to you now could be...
Yes, that's what I was thinking.
And maybe in a few weeks' time, you will no longer be able to talk to me. Maybe I'll be arrested already.
Well, I really hope not. But yeah, I would like to talk more about the collusion, language being added into the law. Do you feel this, this collusion thing, would that also bring risk to other activists and people who've been involved, like Joshua Wong or Benny Tai, or, countless other people in Hong Kong who've supported democracy or independence or various things?
Last year, my party, the Democratic Party, has appointed me to be chair of the International Affairs Committee. And the job, of course, is to have liaison, have engagement, dialogue with the international community, whether it's with political people or scholars, journalists like yourself, academics, NGOs, and so on. So someone has already said that I'm really in the forefront. I mean, depending on how they define the offense, I could very likely be one of the targets. And so also would be other people involved in politics, involved in engaging the international community. But I also want to tell you that yesterday, the Hong Kong Journalists Association, they conducted a survey amongst their members very quickly in the last few days. And they found that 98% of the respondents said they were against this law. And over 90%, they would be in danger And also many of the respondents feel that if this law is foisted on Hong Kong, then there would be much heavier self-censorship because there would be no-go areas for the source or for the journalists. It's not even the authorities who say it. It's just the people who conduct self-censorship. They just draw up their own list. And maybe in future, many people will not want to be interviewed by you or others, lest they should fall into the trap.
You recently have talked about the BNO passports and path to citizenship that Boris Johnson has proposed in the UK if the security law passes. So what do you think of his proposal, first of all?
Well, I think when he said that, many people were really shocked, utterly shocked. Why? Because for many years, many people have given Britain up. They don't think Britain would do anything for Hong Kong, in spite of the fact that Hong Kong had been a British colony for 1.5 centuries, and Britain handed the millions of Hong Kong people over to communist rule in 1997 without consulting the Hong Kong people. And then in the past years, when there were all kinds of very outrageous acts by the Communist Party, Britain did very little. So people had already written Britain off. But then suddenly, when Boris Johnson and Dominic Raab and Priti Patel came out to say, oh yeah, if China enacts the nationality law, Britain would have to offer a path to citizenship to the BNO passport holders. And of course, people welcome it, but I certainly don't think that goes far enough because it entails people having to upstake themselves, move to the UK and to study or to work or to live there for 5 years and then starting to earn the citizenship. And that's a very long process. On the other hand, if you really want to give confidence to the people, then I think what they should do is to give them the citizenship immediately. And it's not as if they have not done it before, because if you cast your mind back to before 1997, in fact, in 1989, there was a massacre in Beijing. And at that time, the Hong Kong people were equally very frightened. And of course, Britain was still running Hong Kong. So they embarked on this British nationality selection scheme, which was, of course, very terrible. And then they selected 50,000 families. So up to 250,000 people were eligible, and they got the citizenship immediately. They have the passport in their pocket, feeling very safe. So it is known as a lifeboat or an escape route policy. The people keep it there. If things go very wrong, then they know they have somewhere to go. But now if you have this thing, people may not want to leave Hong Kong, but if they want to earn it, they have to move to the UK. So I would like to persuade the British government to go a step further. And I know there are members of the British Parliament who are also in favor of that. But of course, there are millions of people here. So in addition to the British effort, I certainly hope there will be an international lifeboat effort or campaign, whatever you call it, to help Hong Kong people. And Britain said they have approached the Five Eyes countries and asked them to also open up and accept Hong Kong people, maybe not in exactly the same way as the UK, but to have a more favorable immigration policy. So these are the things we hope the world can help. So there are two ways. First is to continue to tell Beijing the national security law is in breach of the joint declaration and the basic law is not good for Hong Kong and not good for the People's Republic of China. But also, if the international community can say, oh, well, if they insist on acting in such a barbaric way, and many people are very frightened and they want to leave the city, then our country will open our doors. And the Taiwan government did that yesterday. And so I hope that there will be this international response as well.
I was born in Hong Kong and I am British, even though I live in the US. But yes, I spent 9 years in Hong Kong as a kid. So when I heard about Boris Johnson saying that, because like you said, we've seen over many years, Britain has done nothing over the last 15, 20 years or so. And so I was also very surprised when I heard him say that in a good way. I thought, wow, they're finally actually stepping up and doing something. Would you be able to talk a little bit about what either Taiwan has done in terms of outreach to Hong Kong people or what it could do?
Hong Kong people are very grateful to Taiwan because some of the Hong Kong people have gone to Taiwan and they went there to seek refuge, of course. I think some enter there legally and maybe some enter without the proper procedure. And I think what the Taiwanese government said yesterday was that they just welcome people who enter legally. So I think that's something that the people have to understand. And they also want to do some checking. And one thing that they would like to know is whether these people who want to enter Taiwan will get the paper from the Hong Kong police to show they have no criminal conviction. So they have certain conditions. And because it was only announced yesterday, and so we have to wait and see how the people are going to respond. But, my party has sent a letter to the Home Secretary of the UK, Priti Patel, who is, of course, herself a descendant of Ugandan Asian family. And in the letter, we told Ms. Patel that, they should not bar people from entering the UK if they have a criminal record because they had taken part in the protests of the last year. So this is a point we made to the UK government. And we certainly hope the Taiwan government and other governments would be sympathetic because, as you know, up to now, close to 9,000 people have been arrested and some of them have gone to trial and have been found guilty and are in custody. People would regard those as political offenses. It's not like, murder or, arson, real or things like that. So we hope the governments in the international community will try to make a difference. And I think these, especially the young people, many of them were actually born after 1997. And of course, they are not BNO. They are not eligible for anything. And again, we made that point to the Home Secretary of the UK to try to do something to help them too. So there are all these things about Hong Kong, the situation that we hope the UK government, the Taiwan government, and other governments will also consider sympathetically. Of course, we respect these governments, these places' right to have their own policy. But if they really want to set up a policy for Hong Kong, then they should be sympathetic and they should understand the situation here and to try to help those people who need help most.
Why is it important for the world to pay attention to what is happening in Hong Kong? Why should people in the West and other countries care about Hong Kong?
Well, of course, I'm talking about countries which care about human rights, rule of law, personal safety, and all these international core values. And of course, many countries are signatories to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. So we hope that they are not just, mouthing these things, but in fact, their people and their governments also uphold these values. And so if they see gross human rights violations in other places, not just Hong Kong, but in other places, I think we all have a duty to speak out. But on a more personal level, I think many of these countries, the Five Eyes countries, the G7 countries, they have many of their citizens living and working in Hong Kong, many of their companies operating here. So I have said, if things really go wrong here, how many aircraft carriers or how many Boeing do they have to send to evacuate their citizens? And of course, it will be very messy and very, very horrific if all their companies go bankrupt or are closed down. They will lose a lot of money. So if there is a self-interest angle as well as a wider angle of, helping little Hong Kong when it is in trouble. And also, I think to some countries which subscribe to human rights and the rule of law, for many years, their governments thought the right way to engage China was to help China technologically, whatever way, just help China to grow, become a very important and powerful economic and political power. And in so doing, China will then get big and powerful, but will also adopt the values of the international community to respect human rights, rule of law, and to develop democracy. So some of those people believe it. And now, of course, many of them are queuing up to say how wrong they were. And they feel very, very sorry. So they feel they not so much betrayed, but they thought that they had been misled or they were very misguided. And so they have other feelings. And then they see Hong Kong as being in the front line of this struggle against a very authoritarian, a very dictatorial state. And many of them have been to Hong Kong. They love Hong Kong. And they don't want to see this vibrant and free city suddenly deteriorate into a failed city, into nothing, with people being very fearful. So there are all these feelings mixed together. I have friends in America, I have friends in Europe, in many places, and I call on our friends, not my friends, but friends of Hong Kong, to help us, because this is a very critical moment. We hope you will speak out, and you will do it in whatever way you think, in your wisdom, is the best way to help Hong Kong. And we hope you will help us.